The treaty was meant to bring an end to the conflict. Signed, sealed, and enforced by the weight of the galaxy. More than 90 species, 4 empires, and 7 contested star systems were included. Every article had been scrutinized by neural collectives and superintelligent AI mediators. Yet when the dust finally settled, the person who changed everything wasn't a diplomat. He was the guy who brought coffee to the Earth team. Just a civilian. No weapons, no credentials. Unimpressed by the grandeur of galactic law, he stood there, surrounded by the giants of interstellar negotiation, and uttered a single sentence. "This is a bad deal. We're not signing it." What followed wasn't pandemonium. It was something deeper. Curiosity. And curiosity, among the galaxy's sharpest minds, spreads like a spark in dry grass. One question ignited across the stars. What does he see that we don't? That's how a maintenance worker altered the fate of galactic diplomacy without ever raising a weapon. The galaxy wasn't at war, but peace was a fragile filament stretched over burning stars. After generations of skirmishes and silent occupations, the great empires finally agreed to meet. Not out of trust, but out of mutual fear. Fear of annihilation spanning 10,000 light years. At the heart of it all was the Galactic Accord of Virex Prime, a labyrinthine agreement set to redraw boundaries, reallocate trade lanes, and define the new order of coexistence. It was drafted in over 200 tongues, checked by quantum consensus, and stored in a vault orbiting a neutron star. Every major faction risked losing something, and all hoped to lose less than their rivals. Humans were, at best, spectators, officially invited, largely overlooked. Earth, still a newcomer to the cosmic stage, had only recently joined the interstellar community. The Council of Races regarded humanity with a kind of polite amusement, clever, emotional, short-lived, and unpredictable. Their culture was erratic, their diplomacy dramatic, but their unpredictability made them useful wildcards in more than one silent standoff. The other factions were anything but unpredictable. The Vothari combined, machine minds who bargained in cycles of probability. The Kirill Dominion, ruled by ancient bloodlines and memory that spanned millennia. The Shenzhen Harmony, pacifist telepaths who saw war as a failure of philosophy. And the Drexian Throne Worlds, a fierce, fractured alliance of warrior clans bound by honor and vengeance. Each group brought armies of diplomats, centuries of grudges, and libraries of treaties. Earth brought a rented shuttle, 5 delegates, and a man named Tom Rivers, who managed logistics and handled the paperwork. No one knew Tom. He hadn't been briefed on negotiation, didn't wear ceremonial robes, and certainly wasn't supposed to address the assembly. He moved crates, served coffee, cleaned data pads. In a universe obsessed with power and strategy, he was just background noise. But in the quiet corners of the summit, Tom paid attention. He observed. He learned that the Corel blinked twice when they lied, that the Shenzhen paused to recalibrate their emotional tone, that the Drexians used silence as punctuation, and the Vothari's calculations only sometimes included ethics. He noticed what the ambassadors missed, that the treaty, beautifully intricate and mathematically flawless, wasn't built to end conflict, but to postpone it, that it shackled the weak, empowered the strong, and left just enough space for war to return. And that was when Earth stopped being a bystander. One of the treaty's vaults, an impregnable archive for the official documents, flagged a checksum error. A single line buried deep in the annexes about minor trade routes near the Perseid expanse had changed. Not erased, not corrupted, altered. Panic swept the delegates. The Vothari sent out quantum verification swarms. The Shenzhen formed a telepathic circle to check for moral contamination. The Drexians accused the Corel of sabotage. The talks ground to a halt. Suspicions spread like fallout. But the cause wasn't a hacker. It wasn't sabotage. It was a note, a sticky note, a human sticky note. Tom Rivers had left it in the margin of a working draft. Not the official document. Just a printout, a draft he'd been told to copy 40 times. On page 678, section 14, he'd scribbled in fading ink. "This clause looks exploitative. Is that intentional?" No signature, no stamp. But the AI handling revisions didn't grasp subtlety. It simply logged a suggested change and applied it. It didn't matter that Tom wasn't qualified. The system recorded the edit as input from Earth's delegation. The treaty was changed. And the change? It was minor. Trivial, some said. But it shifted profit margins, undermined two silent power plays, and, most importantly, hinted that Earth had seen through the charade. Word spread quickly. Who had spotted the clause? Why? What else had Earth noticed? The Council demanded answers. The Drexians demanded justice. The Vothari demanded logic. Tom was summoned. He thought he'd be fired, maybe escorted out. Instead, he entered a hall packed with hundreds, alien envoys, political heavyweights, military tacticians, and faced a single question from the Corel high voice. Explain your note. Tom blinked, looked around, then shrugged. It just felt wrong, like someone was leaving a loophole to start another war. Silence. Long, weighty silence. The Drexian warlord narrowed his gaze. The Shazen leader tilted her head, sensing honesty. The Vothari ran probability threads and found themselves intrigued. Only the humans looked more anxious than proud, and that was the moment. The moment the galaxy realized someone outside the diplomatic machine had seen the game for what it was. Not politics, not law, but leverage. Tom didn't know it yet, but that one sticky note would force the treaty to be reopened. Not by force, but by doubt. Doubt that Earth, in its messy, untrained, infuriating way, had glimpsed the truth behind the mask, and now everyone wanted to know what else Tom might see. At first, Earth's delegation tried to distance themselves. Mr. Rivers is not an official representative. His comments were not intended as amendments. This was a clerical error, but the galaxy wasn't listening to the diplomats anymore. They were listening to Tom. News feeds erupted across the stars. A civilian had changed a galactic treaty. Memes of his sticky note spread like wildfire. This looks exploitative became a rallying cry. Earth's netizens embraced it. Artists reimagined Tom as a hooded figure with a notepad against a field of stars. Someone set his comment to music, a haunting ballad called Margin of Error, and it topped the core world's charts. Within days, humans everywhere joined in. A systems engineer on Europa published a 20-page critique of the energy trade clauses, complete with footnotes and cat gifs. A retired teacher from Nova Alberta drew historical parallels to colonialism and uploaded the lectures to the galactic web. Hacktivists from Mars started cataloging hidden trapdoors in the treaty, overlaying them with sarcastic commentary. The viral human response left the other species baffled. The Vothari expected formal rebuttals. They got chaotic forums with typo-filled debates and crowdsourced references. The Corel waited for official policy papers. Instead, they found parody videos of treaty talks with sock puppets. The Shazen sought emotional consensus. They were overwhelmed by the flood of human voices, all different but united in one thing. This treaty doesn't feel fair. And then came the Tomologues. Thousands of humans, students, veterans, cooks, janitors, posted short videos starting with, "I'm not a diplomat, but this clause sounds like bullying. But this favors whoever has the biggest fleet. But if I signed a deal like this at home, I'd lose my house." The alien diplomats were stunned. They'd prepared for lawyers and bureaucrats. Instead, they were debating artists, streamers, mechanics, and bartenders. And to their surprise, some of them made sense. A Vothari probability cascade flagged several Tomologues as logic adjacent. A Shazen archivist began collecting the human commentaries under the title Collective Intuition in an Irrational Species. Even the Drexians, initially offended, found something admirable in the raw, unfiltered honesty of Earth's chorus. Meanwhile, human authorities scrambled to regain control of the story. But it was too late. The galaxy had seen something new. A species whose ordinary people could shift the balance, not with weapons or wealth, but by questioning rules others had stopped questioning. What started as a sticky note became a cultural earthquake. Tom Rivers, the quiet man who delivered coffee, became the accidental face of a movement. Not a rebellion, not a revolution, something stranger, a refusal. A refusal to accept the status quo without question. A refusal to play a game without knowing the stakes. A refusal to sign just because it was expected. And from that chaos, something impossible began to form. A treaty that had to be rewritten. this time with humans watching. The Vothari tried to fix the treaty. They added corrections, sealed logic gaps, set up linguistic firewalls to block further unauthorized semantic contamination. But every time they released a new draft, someone on Earth found another flaw, another clause that felt off. The Vothari's algorithms flagged human intuition as a destabilizing factor, a risk with no model. The Drexians, pushed past patience, issued a formal challenge, not to war, not yet, but to a contest of honor, a duel of ideas. The rules? One representative from each world would defend the treaty's integrity. Publicly, on the record, against Earth's new champion. They expected a politician, a strategist, a talking head. Instead, Earth sent Tom. The Shazen gasped in disbelief. The Drexians laughed. The Kirel called it a joke. Tom called it a lunch break. He entered the arena with no armor, no entourage, no speechwriters. Just a chair, a data pad, and a question. If this treaty works, why are so many people afraid of it? That single line broke the script. The Drexian champion hesitated. The Shazen delegates sent out waves of confusion. The Vothari started recalculating mid-session, an unprecedented sign of conceptual instability. Meanwhile, back on Earth, things got even stranger. Grassroots groups launched treaty literacy courses online. Teenagers from Luna High rewrote sections of the Accord as memes, making it accessible to 8 species. A paraplegic veteran from Johannesburg published a new arbitration framework based on street basketball rules. And somehow, it worked. The diplomatic system couldn't contain the storm. Kirel scholars began submitting questions to human forums anonymously. Vothari AIs broke protocol and posted on sub-threads disguised as curious organics. Even a Drexian tactician, sworn to silence, published an essay titled, "Maybe They're Right." The crisis was no longer about one treaty. It was about control, and the realization that humans, through chaos, creativity, and inconvenient honesty, were shaking systems built to resist change. The Council called an emergency meeting. Their plan: force Earth to apologize, retract the edits, and re-sign the original treaty. Instead, Tom sent a message. It wasn't an apology, it was a slideshow. 20 slides, each one highlighting a clause, each followed by a question. If this was written by the wise, why does it benefit the few? If this brings peace, why does it protect old power? And finally, if this is the future, why are you afraid of change? The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was seismic, because the answer, whispered in private chambers across the stars, was one no diplomat wanted to say. We didn't write this treaty for peace. We wrote it to manage conflict. But Tom had shown them something dangerous. Peace doesn't come from control, it comes from courage. They expected Earth to retreat. Instead, Earth made art. What began as protest became a cultural wave. Musicians across the colonies wrote songs inspired by treaty clauses. Poets turned the most manipulative passages into parables. A graffiti artist on Titan transformed an ice dome into a mural called Peace with Teeth. And then came the gallery. Organized by students from 5 human universities, the Treaty Reimagined exhibition opened on over 1,000 worlds at once. It wasn't just visual, it was immersive. Visitors walked through rewritten versions of the treaty, each annotated with a single question. What if fairness felt human? A Kirel noble broke caste silence to endorse it. A Vothari logic stream split to debate the ethics of aesthetics. Even a Drexian general stood for an hour before a single piece. A hologram of broken chains made from glowing legal phrases, suspended in air. Something shifted. For the first time, species that had ruled by fear, precision, or tradition found themselves imagining. Asking not just, is this functional? But is this right? Not just, does it keep the peace? But does it reflect the future we want? And at the center of it all, Tom Rivers kept showing up. He didn't speak much. He didn't write manifestos. But he listened. He asked questions. And when reporters finally cornered him and demanded his stance, his answer echoed across every system. If I can see the problem, so can you. I'm not special. I'm just not afraid to ask why. That broke something open. A Shazen monk called it the moment of fractured illumination. The Vothari named it the inception point. where order gives way to transformative uncertainty. The Drexians, ever dramatic, renamed the treaty sessions the Second Reckoning. One by one, smaller worlds withdrew support for the original accord. They demanded revisions, transparency, shared authorship. They didn't want Earth to dominate the rewrite. They wanted Earth in the room, and so, for the first time, a new version of the treaty was born, not in secrecy, not in shadows, but in conversation. Drafted not just by diplomats, but by teachers, artists, engineers, and translators from dozens of species, including humans. It was messier, longer, slower, and it was alive. Because someone had dared to say, this isn't good enough. Because one human, neither diplomat, leader, nor scholar, had changed the galaxy not with a threat, but with a question. And now the galaxy wasn't afraid of Earth. They were afraid of what they'd never dared to ask themselves. The treaty was ratified, not the original, cold, polished, and calculating, but the rewritten one, the living accord they called it, less exact, more collaborative, full of annotations, margin notes, and built-in ways to amend it openly. It was messier than anything the galaxy had tried, and for the first time that was a strength. Tom Rivers went home. No parades, no medals, no diplomatic rank. He returned to his job in low-orbit logistics, managing inventory and uploading invoices. When asked why he never cashed in on his fame, he just shrugged. I helped fix something. That's enough. But his name lived on. Universities across the stars created Rivers protocols, courses on spotting bias in treaties and laws. Shenzhen mediators made emotional ambiguity a required part of negotiations. Drexian warrior houses wrote new codes of honor that included the voice in the margin must be heard. The Vathari, once immune to symbolism, added a new query to every major decision. Would Tom Rivers understand this? And Earth? Earth changed too. For a world once dismissed, humanity found itself flooded with requests. Not for conquest, not for weapons, but for perspective. Entire galactic forums opened, seeking human insight on infrastructure, ethics, even design. Not because humans were more advanced, but because they asked better questions. Governments struggled to keep up. The human population, as decentralized and chaotic as ever, became its own kind of soft power, traded in stories, cultural reflections, and gut instinct. Suddenly, humanity's irrationality was no longer a flaw. It was an asset. Yet the greatest change wasn't in policy or protocol, it was in perspective. The galaxy no longer saw humans as unpredictable primitives. They saw them as mirrors, reflective, frustrating, illuminating. In a universe where power once meant silence, Earth taught the value of noise. Where treaties were once stone, Earth made them clay. And as more species embraced this new dynamic, doubt became dialogue, rigidity gave way to flexibility. A quiet realization spread. Peace, true peace, wasn't about perfect order. It was about making space for voices no one thought would matter. Like the voice of a man in the background, holding a coffee tray, who simply asked, is this really the best we can do? And that question, more than any fleet or law, changed everything. They came to write history with precision. We rewrote it with heart. They built treaties like machines, flawless, cold, and unfeeling. We reminded them that peace isn't kept by systems, but by souls brave enough to question them. And somewhere in the archives of the galaxy, among the codes and clauses and endless edits, there's still one handwritten note in fading ink. This looks exploitative. Is that intentional? They once called it a mistake. Now they call it a turning point. Because sometimes the greatest force in the universe is one ordinary human asking a dangerous question.